Hello. Am I live? Let me check. I should have this ready to go already on my phone. I just want to make sure that I think it's fine. If not, I'll repost it. I'll re-upload it later. Hello. So this is going to be a pretty quick live stream, I think. It's going to be mostly it's going to be a little bit show and tell. It's about let me back up. This is going to be eclipse oriented, not about that's mainly it. There's going to be a total solar eclipse on April 8th, just in 3 months. And so I'm going to go into a little bit some of the gear that you need to be able to view it or record it. I'm planning on coming up with a more focused video next week, which will go into some more details. But this is just going to be a quick little show and tell. I plan on putting, if you're watching this later, because I know mostly people don't watch the live stream, but they watch the video afterwards, I'm going to be adding chapter markers, and I'm going to have links. I'll add links to all the items that I mention in the I'll add it to the description. And if I forget to cover anything, I'll also I'll add it to the video, which, like I say, it will be coming out next week. So the first thing is what is happening. There is going to be a total solar eclipse, and it's going to cut through North America, starting down in Mexico, I believe, going through Texas, up to the northeast into Canada. And again, these links will all be, links to this will all be in the description. But let me switch to this. Yeah. So you can see there's a nice, there's several websites out there, but specifically NASA has a nice one. There's also Great American Eclipse, which has some good information. But here's basically the track across, let me try to, there we go. You can see the track across North America, starting over here in Eagle Pass, Texas, and cutting across Texas, going basically through kind of Austin, Waco, Dallas-Fort Worth area. And this path here, for those who aren't familiar, there's actually two eclipses on this path. One was the partial eclipse, the annular eclipse that we just had back in October, and then this one that goes up to the upper right is the one that's coming up in a few months. And you can see that so this path here, this line is significant. These are the areas that you have to be if you want to see a total eclipse. And you can see it kind of goes through through Texas. It goes into through Arkansas, Missouri, Tennessee, and these are the times that basically totality will happen. So as you go east, it's later in the day. So the path is going towards the northeast and goes over Lake Erie, Lake Ontario, and goes over New Brunswick, and then it's probably getting towards sunset over there. But that's the general idea of where the path is going to be. And like I say, I'm going to go into some more details on other things you might need to know, but this is mostly talking about the things you need or you should have to be able to watch the eclipse safely. Whether or not you're going to the path of totality or just seeing the partial eclipse, because a lot of the United States will be getting some level of eclipse. So I showed this on the last live stream. Hopefully this isn't going to produce too much noise on the microphone. But I showed these last time. These are just these solar sunglasses. They're you can get them pretty cheaply. I think I got a 20 pack for $20 or something, maybe more. It's good to have a number of them because then you can share, or if you drop one or damage one. But there's I'll put more details about it, but basically you have to make sure that they're ISO rated, this 12312-2 rating. That makes it that means that it's safe to look at the sun through these. There's a lot of things people sometimes use that aren't necessarily safe, like welding goggles. Basically the problem is you can dim the light a lot of the visible light, but you also have to dim the ultraviolet and infrared from the sun. And I believe welding goggles will dim the ultraviolet, but they're not necessarily rated for looking at the sun because they might let certain frequencies through. I'm not 100% sure. The safest thing is just to get these glasses. Those will make things completely safe. You can get them on Amazon, and I got these from B&H, which is a great camera store if you've never heard of them. Another thing, if you want something with a little bit more magnification, you can get binoculars. These specific binoculars are actually solar binoculars. They have permanently mounted filters on it, so which are also the ISO rated. That way you don't have an accident where you're looking at the sun with a filter on and the filter falls off and then suddenly you're like staring at full sunlight, which would be bad. Very bad. The only problem with these is there's two problems. These can only be used for looking at the sun pretty much because the lenses, the filters are permanently mounted. The other problem is these particular ones are kind of higher magnification, and it's kind of tricky to find the sun. I noticed that back in October when we had that the partial eclipse. You kind of are searching, and because it blocks out light so well, you can't really even see the sky. It's just black until you get pretty close to the sun, and then you see glare. So these specific ones are a little bit higher magnification. I probably should have gotten the ones with slightly less magnification. But when you do get the sun through it, if you're experienced pointing things at the sun, it was pretty impressive. But it doesn't help during totality. During the total phases of the eclipse, it's very you can't use the solar filters because you wouldn't see anything because the surface of the sun is completely covered up by the moon. The other thing I have here, so I'm just going to quickly go. I have, like I was saying, this is going to be a little bit of a show and tell thing. You can see I have this. I had some photos from 2017. Let me not go to that quite yet. But you can see from 2017, this was, I just basically used a DSLR on a tripod. You can see it was on a star tracker, but I was having some issues with the star tracker. It can track the sun, but the specific one I had some issues. So this is the, let me switch to the main view. So this is the lens I used for that, and I also used it in just this fall. I have a video on YouTube of a time lapse I shot with this lens. Now this one in 17, I shot it with a mirrorless crop sensor so that it had better magnification. Then I shot it full frame on a full frame camera. I'll go into some of those details, and if you have any questions, if you're not familiar with some of this, just comment and I'll answer. But you can see it's a nice, pretty weighty lens, and it's a Canon lens, but it's for Canon mount, but it's made by Sigma, and they make for all the other mounts, all the standard mounts like Nikon and Sony, of course. And this one magnifies, it extends quite a bit, and you can see that in this image here, where I have it fully extended, and you can also see that I had this exact filter on top, and this is basically the same kind of material in the solar sunglasses. So basically the same kind of reflective dark material, but a bigger one, and it just kind of fits over the. I got it specifically for this lens, so it kind of fits on the end of it, and the results were reasonable. Like I said, I took some photos in 2017 from the total eclipse that went kind of on a more northerly track across the United States. But I also used it just a few months ago for the partial eclipse, and it works great. And like I say, these I'll put a link. They don't cost that much. The bigger you get them, the slightly more expensive, but it's well worth it. And even though it's cardboard, I kind of put it in a box and in a Ziploc bag, I think, and it still works fine. That said, since I'm using it on a mirrorless camera and not a DSLR, DSLRs, you have a direct path to your eye. With a mirrorless, it has a screen. So worst comes to worst, if this wasn't 100% effective, it would fry your camera sensor, not your eyeball, which isn't ideal to fry the camera sensor, but it's better than frying your eye. But it doesn't seem to have any problem. So, like I say, I've only used it a few times for eclipses. So, I'll put a link in the description. The other thing about this is it comes with a built-in tripod mount, but what I ended up doing in more recently, because it tends to rotate on the tripod as you're kind of tracking things across the sky, I attached this dovetail plate, and so it's kind of more locked in. These are a few bucks, but well worth it. So this was the setup I had in 2017, you can see, and the results weren't terrible. Some of it might look a little grainy, and that was more a problem with the camera I was using. It was like, even though it was in 2017, the camera I was using was it was a nice camera in the day, but that specific SLR first came out in 2009, so it was like old technology. But one thing I want to kind of draw your attention to, so you can see how big the moon, covering the sun is, and how far out the coronal streamers are. So that's something to keep in mind when you're figuring out if you end up buying a lens, or if you have a telescope, is figuring out how much magnification you need. Like, how are you going to frame the sun, especially at totality? It's relatively easy during the partial phases because it only has to be, like, how big the sun is. You can practice ahead of time, but the corona can be 2-3 diameters out. And this one is interesting too. If you can see this star here, it's actually a star. It's Regulus. So since it gets so dark from in the sky, I mean, it's not like dark, but through this lens, I was able to see Regulus. And then my daughter actually took this photo with a fisheye lens, and you can see there were some high haze and some clouds, but we were still able to kind of, the sun's bright enough during the partial phases that it really didn't interfere much. And if you see, it might be hard to see on the stream, but there's like a dot right there, a star it looks like. It's actually Venus. So one thing I would recommend checking out is if you can try to image Venus. And here's another angle where you can kind of see basically the we're in the moon's shadow. And one of the neatest things, if you get to totality, which I highly recommend, to the place where totality is, if you've never been before, there's so many interesting things that happen during the eclipse. And one of them is, like, in the middle of it, you have kind of this twilight effect, but it's 360 degrees, because, like, you're under the moon's shadow, and, like, every direction it's like twilight, which isn't normal, which is pretty cool. Now this one is highly grainy. I'm going to try to clean it up, but with some software, I'm not sure. But it was, again, an old camera, and it was a fairly short duration for totality in 2017. But you can kind of see how there's some prominences showing up. And then this at the very end, where the first little fragment of, the first little bit of sunlight kind of peeks out. And it's called the diamond ring, where basically it's kind of like a diamond ring. You can still see a little bit of the corona, but then you have the full brightness of the sun there, and it kind of looks like a diamond ring. Now, as you can see, so now forwarding to 2023, during the partial eclipse, you can see what I was talking about, where I have this dovetail attached to the lens. And then instead of using the tripod, the star tracker I had, I got this thing. But again, it's one of those things where it's kind of it's great, but it's kind of a single-use item. It's not a star tracker, it's a sun tracker. And there's other devices out there that do this, but they're kind of expensive. This one isn't cheap. It was, I mean, for how many times you might end up using it, it was, I think, $500. It came with a tripod. This is just the tracking head, and if you and you can see it's got like a GPS built into it, and it's got a camera here. So when you power it up, it knows where it is on Earth, and so it automatically starts looking for the sun. So it knows what angle it's at, and then it kind of points generally, and then this piece, this little sensor will find the sun. And it's awesome because it just locks into the sun. Because the problem is with a lot of normal star trackers, you align them at night, because you can see stars and you can get frames of reference. You can't do that during the day. So especially if you're kind of going to a place and quickly setting up, where you might, like if you're in the same location and you're able to set up your tracker the night before, then you're pretty accurate. But this will just stay locked in. But again, it's kind of a special purpose. Now, if you plan on doing more solar observing going forward, you can attach a telescope to this. You can use the standard dovetail plate and attach a telescope, which I've done, and it works great. Same thing, it just kind of points your telescope. Now, you can't put a huge telescope on it. It's kind of got limitations, but all things considered, it's made by Skywatcher. Again, I'll put a link in the description. They sold out at one point before the October eclipse, but then I was able to get one like at the last minute through, and I had it for the eclipse, so it was great. I used it for the time lapse that I ended up that I shot. Now, other things. Let me see what else. Make sure I'm not skipping over anything. Yeah. So one thing is because I was having problems in 2017 with the star tracker, I ended up just kind of pulling the camera off the tripod to holding the camera and lens, and that was part of the reason why some of the exposures ended up a bit off, which wasn't ideal. But again, old camera, old technology. I haven't mentioned my favorite new telescope, the Seestar. That will be handy for the full phases, but not so handy for the partial phases. And I'll get into that in a bit. I have some visual to show where you can kind of get an idea. Now, one cool thing to kind of watch out for, whether you're in the partial area or in totality, outside of the total phases, interesting things start happening environmentally. It starts getting noticeably dimmer, kind of like it's a weird effect, because like the sun is up in the sky, but yet it seems like there's a cloud over it, or haze, but there isn't if it's clear. And so it gets visibly dimmer, especially as you get further along. And one of the coolest things I always find is just looking at kind of shadows, because you see splotches of lights under trees and stuff, but you don't necessarily realize that those splotches are actually little pinhole projections of the sun. And so they all, you can see in this photo, they all become crescents. This is a photo I took at my house, but this one is really cool. This was one my father-in-law took. Let's see if I can do this without breaking anything. Yeah, I'm just going to play just a snippet of this. He sent me this during the eclipse back in October. But you can see, like look at that. Like, this is on his driveway. You can just see like all the little crescent suns, like all over the place. It's just really cool. But that's something to be on the watch out. That's something to be on the lookout for during the eclipse, those environmental effects. So lastly, the last thing I want to kind of get into is what kind of magnification. Oh, one last thing. When I took that time lapse of so you might want to take a bunch of photos, and one thing I did to kind of automate that process so I could do that animation of the whole partial phases of the sun just a few months ago, is I got this intervalometer which just plugs into a remote release that many mirrorless and SLRs have, and you can say, okay, take a photo every 5 seconds, and it'll just keep doing it. And so it's great. I just basically set it up, pointed it at the sun, or the heliofind, pointed it at the sun, and it just took a whole bunch of photos, couple thousand of them, and I ended up kind of afterwards combining them with some software into a movie, which is pretty cool. It's fairly low effort, and these intervalometers don't cost much. This isn't a Canon branded one, but it works with Canons. They vary depending on the model you have. This one I think was like $20, which isn't bad for what it does. But lastly, getting into the imaging and what kind of magnification you need, I thought it would be handy to actually do a visual. So let me switch to this. Okay, so this is some open source software. At least it's free, called Stellarium. It's great. So I picked Waco, Texas, which is on the total eclipse path, and I've set the date forward to April 8th at 1:39 p.m. and I froze time. And so you can kind of see it does a nice representation. You can see what it would look like roughly. And you can see there's a double star there. it isn't as bright as Regulus was back in 2017, but you know, might be able to pick it up. But you can go. So this is, let me magnify it. Oh, dang it. Oops, sorry. Okay, so you can see this is the field of view. I put some camera and lens combinations, so you can see kind of what field of view now you would see. Now, remember that the photo I shot in 2017 was even wider than this, because I was getting some streamers out two or three diameters out, and this only goes out. It goes 2 in some directions, but depending on which directions the coronal streamers are, you might not be able to capture it. This is actually the exact same camera I had, a Canon EOS 7D, and this is, I have this 600 millimeter Sigma lens. So this is what it looks like. And this is a Canon crop, but Sony crop is very similar to this. So you can kind of see 600 millimeters kind of punched in. This is 150, which is the other end of the zoom range. And you can kind of start seeing a much wider field. Now, that's probably too wide. That's why having kind of a zoom would be handy. And it was very handy in 2017. But you notice up here, you see mention of Mercury. So as I kind of start getting wider, remember I had that really wide angle photo with Venus. Well, here's Venus, and you could probably pick it up with like a 50 millimeter lens. See? So that's something to keep in mind, especially if you have a second camera, like you might have an older one. It might be worth putting 50 millimeter lens and trying to capture the moon and Venus in one shot, or I mean the eclipsed sun and Venus. And then if you go even wider, you could actually potentially get, I think I figured a 35 millimeter, you could actually get Jupiter in, no. Oh yeah, no, that's why. This is on a crop sensor, but I also put in full frame, so you can actually see that that a full frame with a 35 millimeter lens, you could actually get Venus, the eclipsed sun, and Jupiter in one shot. And those planets are bright enough. I think it should be doable. Which that would be an interesting. That could be an interesting photo. I'm going to try to do it, so we'll see how that works. But you can see that with, oops, see, it's because I clicked on that item. Let me click on that. But as you can see, with a full frame and a 50 millimeter, you can definitely get the moon and Venus in. Even an 85 millimeter, you can get it in the field of view. But as you get back to that, you can see with the 600, with a full frame camera, you get a wider field of view. It's not as magnified, so that might actually be good for the total phases. And just to give you an idea of what the Seestar would look like, this is the Seestar sensor. As you can see, it's kind of punched in. And so during the total phases, where you're just imaging the partial phase, the sun, the visible sun, it would work great. But you can see it's way too magnified to be able to really get much of the corona. But that was kind of a little fun exercise to try to, help prepare, for what kind of lenses and what kind of magnification you need to actually capture it. So I think that was actually all I was going to cover. Let me just double check. Yeah. That was all I was going to cover. I'll be updating the description and on this video, and I'll be adding some chapter markers and stuff if you're watching this afterwards. And look for next week. I'll be early next week. I should be coming out with a more tightly edited, and maybe if I forgot some things, I'll go into some extra details. I'll go in the video that's coming out early next week. But in the meantime, that's all I have right now, and I'll be covering something different next week. I won't be talking about the Eclipse the whole stream, but I will on next Friday, but I will be going over something else. But I know what it is, but I forgot. But yeah, so that'll be next week, and in the meantime, if you have any questions, just add them and I'll answer the best I can. Until next time.